Every soldier that graduates Officer Candidate School is exceptional. Those who have led distinguished careers following their graduation are duly honored in the OCS Hall of Fame. Some rise to the top of the top. They have attained national and/or international recognition for their military service, public service, business leadership, education leadership, or philanthropy. Here are the newly selected Officer Candidate School Distinguished Members and just some of their extraordinary accomplishments. After returning from World War II as a decorated lieutenant colonel, Winthrop Rockefeller moved to Arkansas to begin a business career. His efforts to create a competitive Republican Party in a deeply Democratic state paid off in 1966 when he became the first Republican to win the governorship of Arkansas since 1873. He served 2 terms and is credited with making a series of reforms in spite of a hostile state legislature. After leaving office in 1970, he co-chaired a committee planning a new National Infantry Museum at Fort Benning. His death in 1973 precluded the realization of his full vision until 2009 when this museum opened, honoring him and others as distinguished members of the OCS Hall of Fame. Caspar Weinberger launched a legal career after serving in the Pacific Theater during World War II. He entered California politics as an assemblyman in 1954 and for the next 15 years became a trusted follower of 2 future presidents. In 1973, he was named President Nixon's Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. He later served nearly 7 years as Secretary of Defense for President Reagan. He was instrumental in the defense buildup that ultimately caused the fall of the Soviet Union, actions that laid the foundation for a modern military that quickly won Desert Storm and toppled Saddam Hussein's government. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Reagan and an honorary British knighthood from Queen Elizabeth II. The last serving World War II veteran, John Dingell Jr., is the longest serving member of Congress in our nation's history with over 59 years as a congressman. He followed his father, who served for 22 years, and was succeeded by his wife, who is currently serving. As chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, he was regarded as one of the most powerful members of Congress. He vigorously pursued waste and abuse in government and insisted on those who testified before his committee did so under oath. For his years of service on the committee, he was given the rare title of Chairman Emeritus. After serving as a military intelligence officer in World War II, Frank Church earned a law degree and worked briefly as a lawyer before being elected as one of the nation's youngest senators at 30 years old. He would champion liberal causes and sponsored the Wilderness Act and the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. He is most known for heading the Church Committee that inspired the passage of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He also led efforts to ratify the treaty to return the Panama Canal to Panama. General Frederick Croson is one of only 324 infantrymen authorized to wear the Combat Infantry Badge with 2 stars, denoting active combat in 3 wars. He commanded troops in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and later commanded the 82nd Airborne Division 7 Corps 7th U.S. Army Europe NATO Central Army Group, and ended his career as the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. In addition to surviving combat in 3 wars, as a general officer, he survived a terrorist attack on his vehicle while stationed in Germany. During his service, he was awarded the Silver Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, a Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star with Valor, 29 Air Medals, and Purple Heart with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters. After his valorous World War II service and long recovery from wounds sustained, Bob Dole earned a law degree and set up practice in his hometown of Russell, Kansas. In 1960, he was elected to Congress, launching one of the most impressive careers of public service in our nation's history. He entered the Senate in 1968 and served as both minority and majority leader from 1987 to 1996. He was then the Republican candidate for president in 1996. He was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, our nation's highest award for a civilian, in recognition of his service to the nation as a soldier, legislator, and statesman. After World War II, William Gates Sr. used his GI benefits to earn a law degree. He later became an advocate for similar legislation that would benefit the current generation. He enjoyed a remarkable 30-plus year career in a law firm that bears his name. In 1994, he accepted the challenge to guide the vision and strategic direction of the William H. Gates Foundation, which became the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2000. He has earned global respect in his role as co-chairman of the world's largest philanthropic foundation. For his selfless service, he has earned the Winston Churchill Leadership Award, the Woodrow Wilson Award for Public Service, and the United Nations Association's Humanitarian Millennium Leadership Award. After returning from duty in the Occupation Army in Europe, John Marsh served as town attorney and judge for Newmarket, Virginia, an experience that helped him win elections in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1963 to 1971. He would then hold prestigious and cabinet-level positions for Presidents Nixon and Ford, culminating with Secretary of the Army, a post he held for more than 8 years, longer than any other secretary. There, he focused on the systems that modernized the Army, including the Abrams tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle, the Black Hawk and Apache helicopters, and the Patriot air defense system. He remained in the Army Reserves and National Guard even while in Congress, and served in Vietnam with troops who were unaware of his status as a congressman. William F. Buckley Jr. was a conservative author and commentator. He founded National Review magazine and hosted Firing Line. He was said to be arguably the most important public intellectual in the United States for the last half of the 20th century. Fellow distinguished member Senator Bob Dole said that Buckley lit the fire for the new American conservative movement that propelled Ronald Reagan's presidential candidacy. He authored more than 50 books on history, politics, religion, and even novels inspired by his time in the CIA after his military service. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George H.W. Bush in 1991. After military service that included duty in occupied Japan, Terrence Todman completed college and began a career in the Foreign Service. He encountered institutional racism in the State Department, but was driven to overcome it. By the time he was 43, he had earned widespread respect from colleagues and leadership alike. President Nixon named him ambassador to Chad, making him one of the first African Americans to hold such a position. He eventually became an ambassador to 6 foreign nations, retiring at the prestigious rank of career ambassador. He is credited with paving the way for other minorities who have made important contributions through their foreign service in the State Department. After his World War II service, Gordon Gray embarked on an amazing and diverse career at the highest levels of government and education. Having served in the North Carolina General Assembly before and after the war, he was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Army in 1947 and Secretary in 1949. He would leave government service in late 1950 to become the president of the University of North Carolina System. He returned to government service in 1955 and became the National Security Advisor to President Eisenhower from 1958 to 1961, for which he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. As a second lieutenant, General Robert Kingston earned 2 Silver Stars for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against the enemy as Commander Task Force Kingston in Korea. In Vietnam, he earned a Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism commanding forces on a search and destroy mission. He commanded multiple Ranger and Special units during his career and served as the first commander of U.S. Central Command when it was formed in 1983 in response to the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet Union occupation of Afghanistan. Commissioned in 1953, General James Lindsay commanded infantry and special operations units at all levels. A distinguished paratrooper, he held 8 assignments in the 82nd Airborne Division from platoon leader to division commander. During multiple tours in Vietnam, he served notably as an advisor to the Vietnamese Airborne Brigade and commander 2nd Battalion 60th Infantry. He later commanded the U.S. Army Infantry School, the 18th Airborne Corps, and ultimately served as the first commander, U.S. Special Operations Command. His awards include the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star with 3 oak leaf clusters, and Master Parachutist Badge with 2 combat stars. General Lindsay is a member of the Ranger Hall of Fame and the 1996 recipient of the Infantry's Doughboy Award. Commissioned initially as an infantry officer in 1959, General Leon Solomon would later transfer to the Ordnance Corps in 1974. Following a tour in Vietnam and graduation from the Air Force Institute of Technology, General Solomon began working on developing automation systems to support the Army's global logistics operations. A phenomenal logistics leader, he served as a maintenance battalion commander in Germany and later the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division Support Command. As the 23rd Chief of Ordnance, General Solomon promoted a teacher-mentor approach to his training process, a practice that continues today. In his last uniformed job as Commanding General, U.S. Army Material Command, he reset the logistical footprint of the Army following the post-Cold War Desert Storm drawdown. General John Shalikashvili was the first foreign-born chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the first draftee to rise to the position, and the first OCS graduate to be appointed chairman. He was born in Warsaw in 1936, survived the German occupation of Poland in the 1944 Warsaw Uprising, and then immigrated with his family to the United States. In 1958, he became a U.S. citizen after having been classified as stateless due to his parents' refugee status. He was drafted into the Army, applied for OCS, and was commissioned in 1959. Shalikashvili was described in the New York Times as the intellectual godfather of the Partnership for Peace, NATO's military cooperation program with the former members of the Warsaw Pact. Enlisting in 1961 and rising to the rank of Staff Sergeant, General Johnny Wilson was commissioned into the Ordnance Corps in 1967. A distinguished logistician, General Wilson served at every level of command. Most notably, he commanded 3 times at company level: 82nd Airborne Division, 173rd Airborne Brigade in Vietnam, and the 1st Armored Division in Europe. General Wilson's general officer assignments include Deputy Commanding General, 21st Theater Support Command in Europe, the Army's largest and most diverse logistics unit, and as the 25th Chief of Ordnance. General Wilson ultimately led the Army Material Command, consisting of more than 70,000 personnel operating in more than 100 locations worldwide, responsible for the development of weapon systems, maintenance, and parts distribution. A proud Oklahoma native, enlisted soldier, and field artilleryman, General Tommy Franks served as a forward and aerial observer in Vietnam. He would go on to command at every level, to include the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea and ultimately U.S. Central Command. Following the attacks of September 11th, he would oversee the invasions of both Afghanistan and Iraq in the opening years of the global war on terrorism. A recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, General Franks' memoirs, American Soldier, debuted as #1 on the New York Times bestseller list in 2004. As a young armor officer, General John Abrams served 2 years in Vietnam from platoon leader to troop commander. He earned 2 Silver Stars, a Bronze Star for Valor, and was wounded during his service. He went on to command the famed 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, the 2nd Infantry Division and 5th Corps, becoming the second father and son to command the same unit, the first being George Patton Jr. and George III. His final duty assignment was as Commander of Training and Doctrine Command. Commissioned as an infantryman, General Buck Kernan served in Vietnam as a rifle and reconnaissance platoon leader with the 101st Airborne Division. A distinguished paratrooper and ranger, he would command paratroopers at all levels in the 82nd Airborne Division, 3rd British Parachute Regiment, and 1st and 2nd Ranger Battalions. In 1989, as the 6th Colonel of the 75th Ranger Regiment, General Kernan led his Rangers in a combat parachute assault into Panama during Operation Just Cause. He would later command the 101st Airborne Division in the 18th Airborne Corps. As Commander, U.S. Army Joint Forces Command, he oversaw the readiness of all services to respond to the challenges of the global war on terrorism. Commissioned as an infantryman following graduation from OCS, General Benjamin Griffin spent his company-grade years in the 82nd Airborne Division. He subsequently served in Germany as a battalion commander, Alaska as a brigade commander, and Fort Hood, Texas as commander of the 4th Infantry Division. Following division command, General Griffin served as the Army Deputy Chief of Staff, responsible for fielding the forces being deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. As Commanding General of the Army Material Command, General Griffin oversaw equipment lifecycle management and sustainment of a global force conducting major combat and contingency operations in more than 140 nations. General Brian Brown is one of our nation's foremost special operations soldiers. He served on a Green Beret A-Team in Vietnam as an enlisted soldier and ended up as the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command for 4 years during the global war on terrorism. Between those assignments, he was actively involved as a special operations officer in all our nation's conflicts. He has served on the ground and as a pioneer Night Stalker helicopter commander. His unit was the first to use night vision goggles during Operation Urgent Fury, and he was the first to command a battalion of the legendary 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment during Desert Storm. Ladies and gentlemen, your Officer Candidate School Hall of Fame Distinguished Members.